Cannabis Talk. That's the name of this show. And I got the music right this time. Woohoo! That's right, folks. Thanks for tuning in. This is Cannabis Talk with your host, the incorrigible Mr. Zappo. This segment of my podcast multi-series is dedicated to a very simple notion. Cannabis can save the world. One bowl at a time. So, today is the same day it was earlier. It's now 6 p.m. Sorry, everybody. I was not prepared or ready at 3:45. So, I'm on at 6 p.m. Pacific time, but every hour can be 4:20 if you want it to. Any hour on the 20. Anyways, hope you're all doing well. Thanks for tuning in. Not that anybody's tuning in live on Sprecher. Yeah, this and all my shows are recorded live in front of a totally empty Sprecher audience. Here we go. Oh, enough sound effects. We'll save some sound effects for later. It's amazing to me just how intensely and how blatantly, powerfully well, the us versus them, divide and conquer, get everyone to pick sides on an ideological divide and then blindly fight over it instead of uniting to solve the problems. Just how well that agenda has been effectively escalating its impact. I don't want to sound snotty because I'm not. I'm not special. I'm not enlightened, and I'll have to say that at least once a day during the course of this entire project because that's not what I'm here for. I'm not here to tell people that I know something so much more important than anything you know. Although I guess I did sort of phrase a statement like that in a recent segment. I digress. The world is wrapped up in argumentation. There are stoners fighting stoners. Not that many stoners throw punches. Not without the benefit of being wrapped up in some other substance. No, but I guess even stoners get violent. But yeah, there's look at any demographic that you want, and look deep, and you'll see that there are already many schisms in that demographic, and the people are arguing and fighting amongst each other in that demographic, whatever that whole unity. You know what I'm saying? Like, let's go through some. There's Christians arguing with Christians about stuff that don't make sense for Christians to be arguing about. And that ain't you. They've been doing that since what's-his-name pinned that note on the door saying, hang on a minute. I want to start my own spin-off of Christianity. Who was that? Who was the first guy to do that? Martin Luther, I think? I could be wrong. The first Protestant, right? He's the first to protest the mother church of Catholicism. Well, regardless of whether I mean to if I actually literally mean Martin Luther or any other, Christian spin-off group, you see my point. Nerds are killing nerds. Jocks are punching and beating up jocks. It's madness. It's pandemonium. Republicans are... Oh, sorry, folks. I forgot I hit that button. Republicans are going crazy fighting other Republicans. While division and disagreement are perfectly normal, I'm not trying to suggest that any demographic group or that humanity at large should be some monolith of unified thinking, especially not vis-a-vis any of the current paradigms of thinking that are popular in the world. By all means, I'm not suggesting that whatsoever. I'm just astonished at how well the oppressors have riled us up this current cycle in time. Everyone's all kinds of upside downs and crazy, you know? And everywhere you look on social media, it's either meaningless drivel or it's gauntlets being thrown at each other's feet about which ideological construct is better than, you know, the rest. Like, the world is obsessed with flat earth versus globist. And the part that I'm indicating isn't flat earth or globist that the obsession is about, but everyone's this versus that. Everything's got to be a this versus that kind of scenario. Look around. Yeah? And I've always said, like, that's the whole trick to getting to a solution, getting at a transcendence, getting past the situation we're in now. The very, very first thing that has to be achieved at an individual and a species-wide level is an abdication of this argumentation, this addiction to us versus them. Democrats versus Republicans. Conservatives versus ultra right-wingers versus the centrist-leaning. They just keep making up labels and dividing people down further. And it's sad because all people are the same. Like, we are all miraculously identical and infinitely unique. That's our bond. That's what should be bringing us together, is that we are all simultaneously, like, exactly the same and infinitely varied. That should be mind-blowingly enough to bring us together. That should be beautiful enough to bring us all together. Clearly, the seeds of hate have been sown for a long time. Clearly, the lines of division, people have been badgering us, the oppressors have been badgering us with this for ages. And every time we get fed up and stand up and rise up and have some kind of revolution, they dangle some poor, helpless puppet as sacrifice offering for us to take our anger, immediate short-term anger out on. And then they reconfigure and remix and rearrange the same basic ingredients of mind control and societal structures to keep profiteering on us and keep us returning to never-ending, ever-escalating conflict. The genius thing is, the brilliant thing is that Mother Nature is not unaware of this. Mother Nature is not ignoring our situation. And many people who might upon initially addressing the issue or integrating, addressing the thought of Mother Nature and her relationship to the way we treat her, many people might be concerned, well, yeah, Mother Nature is deeply involved in preparing to wipe us off the face of her own womb. And that might be the case if we were so far gone in our cynicism and in our ego trap that there was zero hope for drawing down, as one group calls it. Who's the name of that fellow who runs? He doesn't run it. Beautiful public speaker, by the way, with a really clear, concise message. He currently has a video on C-SPAN or on YouTube that you can find. You should look this guy up. Paul Hawken, if you've never heard of him. If you've never read his book, Drawdown. I haven't read the book. Excuse me, folks. I'm still in the end stages of fighting off a cold. So I'm a little coughy. I have a bit of a cough. This book and this organization's work seems to me to be the most clear-sighted understanding of humanity's addiction to destroying Mother Earth and the ways in which we can make up for all the horrible practices we've been engaging in by owning up to the simple fact that it's just a matter of crunching the numbers and changing our behavior, changing the way we do things. And these guys do it. Their message is great. The video is great. It seems to have a very clear and upbeat message. And I don't want to get into an argument about whether or not climate change is real, because that's as silly of an argument as whether or not the Earth is flat or round or a globe or any other shape. Set aside the notion or whatever predisposition ideas you may have about what climate change is, and let's just take a real, honest, hard look at history and the facts of the matter. The way we operate society by default the way we run society churns out massive amounts of toxic substances. So don't stop worrying about climate change and start thinking of this in more immediate terms. Toxic substances, which are the waste products of just about everything we do, and don't try to pin this on big giant corporations. Think about this. Every time you get into your car and go, every inch, every foot, every mile, that car is pumping out toxic waste, which if you tried to suck on it, on the tailpipe, it would kill you. In fact, the fumes that come out of your car are so obviously toxic that people do indeed all the time use it as a method of committing suicide. Now, I'm not trying to lay the blame solely on your feet. I'm just trying to walk you through a thought process that might shake your paradigms a little bit. It isn't any one individual's person's fault that we were born into the system this fucked up. The system's been toxic and dirty and painful and abusive and traumatic for centuries. And by the system, I mean the way we live as a society on this planet. We should really change the term on this planet, the phrasing on this planet, to in this womb. But people don't like that word for some reason. It offends them. In this uterus isn't any better. In this egg is too abstract. But for those of you, who get why I use those terms, this isn't. We need to bring these questions, these challenges to the conversation with everybody around us. Obviously, I'm not. This show is not about preaching to the choir. None of my segments, Cannabis Talk, and I'm not even talking about cannabis right now, right? I'm just talking about it's the end of my day. I'm going to consume cannabis now in anticipation of my meditation and of my sleeping. So I'm doing the show under the influence of cannabis. That's what makes Cannabis Talk, as opposed to the other shows, during which theoretically I'm not under the influence of cannabis. Right. How can cannabis and its sister plant hemp save the world one bowl at a time, 1 acre of land at a time, one seed at a time? Might be the most real, because 1 bowl at a time is a bit silly. But that's meant to attract stoners. This segment, of course, is a segment about cannabis culture. And as someone that has had lots of connections to the underground cannabis culture for many years now, And as a person who's clear-sighted and open-hearted about the kind of contribution I want to provide to the radical explosion of postmodern cannabis culture, let's call that, we need a new name, like post decriminalization or post whatever. We're in a new era of cannabis culture growth. And granted, that's going to mean a lot of new corporate-ism, corporate style of marketing. It's going to be a lot of, selling of cannabis. We're just going to, but let's stop for a moment, my fellow cannabis enthusiasts. Is that all we want our culture to be? Is just another echo chamber of marketing to get us to buy the product we're already in love with? To get us to invest more in them, to buy more of the plant that we want to heal ourselves with? Is that what cannabis? Is that what would best service the sacred plant and its role here on Earth and in human history? I humbly suggest to you, my dear friends, and I'm not saying this with anger. I'm saying this with hey. Any one of you, all of us together out there who want to be part of this new era, we need to be thoughtful along these lines. Or else, the really big ships of being massive influencers of cannabis culture for the benefit of mankind as opposed to the lining of corporations' pockets, it's going to, escape us. The last thing we want is for cannabis to become a corporatized, privatized, free market industry sector that adapts its marketing tactics according to the will of the free market. Because that's, anybody who looks at market economics deeply enough realizes that the free market is not an organic representation of all of us as presumed consumers, because that's not what free market is. Free market is the implementation of ideological constructs that cater to the wealthy who want to profiteer on us. That's what free market is. And if you agree, then cheers. Here's a bowl to you. Here's a toke to you. But let's not just sit around in our self-indulgent stoner privilege of going, we figured it all out because we sat and talked over a bowl. And then forget about what we discussed and wake up the next day and still have to get in our cars and drive to work to the same slave wage labor that we... You know what I'm saying? Like, the movement has to transcend the success of the marketing campaign to get people on board as consumers. Our relationship to cannabis should not wind up looking just like our relationship to Coca-Cola or Apple. And I mean Apple like the iPhone. You know what I mean? Do you understand what I'm saying, my friends? So, in previous episodes, and right now, as I'm about to say it again, I'm of the humble belief, and I don't like the use of the word belief. I'm of the humble conviction, based on my understanding of the facts, my personal phenomenological experience with the cannabis plant, that cannabis is a sacred gift. And I think people are going, what the fuck does that mean? I'm obviously not everyone's saying that, because some people are running off to start cannabis churches. I had the idea years ago. And now that cannabis law is changing at the state level, some people who clearly had the idea years ago too are launching cannabis churches. If anybody who is a fan of my social media or of this podcast who thinks that's a cool idea and has the bankroll to get it started, let's team up. Because yes, I'm a cannabis spiritualist and mystic, And I understand all the pitfalls that may seem, on the horizon saying that. I guess I should... Well, people will ask me how. Why? How? How is cannabis spiritual? Well, cannabis, I propose to you, for those of you who don't already think this way, is not an intoxicant. It is... instead of thinking of it in terms of something that impedes or blocks your natural functioning, which is what intoxicants do. Toxic things disrupt the functioning of your body to the point of endangering illness and death, or threatening you with illness and death, or causing illness and death. This is much more like superfood nutrition. And that the phenomena experienced by those who consume cannabis is in fact some of the more obvious phenomena experienced are the like symptoms of your body's sensory perception systems being amped way above the norm in a way that's good for you, because we're out of touch with our own sensory apparatus. And if I had to boil it down into terms that are easier to understand, like if cannabis could be described as a group or a movement as opposed to a plant, right? Those kinds of terms, then cannabis has an objective or a goal, which is to remind us that our sensory apparatus, the body that we live in, that we reside in, that we occupy, that we utilize, can operate on multiple levels and has much more to, can heighten its own awareness and its own capacity to process input above and beyond that which the statist examples of norm will see allow us to be aware of, and that can be a really good thing, and it's healing, right? Obviously, do I need to relitigate the healing of evidence, and the scientific research is happening, and I'm really encouraged, although I wonder how much of it is just clickbait marketing for shit that isn't really about real research, but there seems to be encouraging evidence that more and more cannabis research is being prepared or is on the verge of being done, because there's a lot more chatter about it on social media, both in paid advertisings, which is kind of interesting. That means that there's some investment money behind it already, and in just in general discussion amongst individuals out there. And that's encouraging, because so much of the research and the quote-unquote science on cannabis before this tipping point in history that we're living through right now was bad science. So much of that science was paid for by the tobacco industry or by the alcohol industry or by some other industry that was trying to keep cannabis use oppressed and as low as possible. And there's plenty of vested interests in that clearly have spent quite a fortune in avoiding this tidal wave of change and trying to oppress the realization that cannabis has healing properties, and that it definitely deserves deeper investigation as to how those healing properties can be applied. I'm here, obviously, to propose to you that one of those ways that cannabis can help facilitate the human species is through meditation, and that it can and ought to be consumed in conjunction with, or in some kind of interesting strategery around meditation. I can imagine that there might be an argument against it, I have heard some people call cannabis the dream stealer, and I'm not sure where that comes from. I'd never heard it before, but someone was talking about how after they had stopped smoking cannabis, their rate of like episodes of dreaming, especially highly vivid dreaming, suddenly skyrocketed. And I don't know, I don't know where I stand on that, because it's an interesting thing. Like, I experience other than that. My experience is different than that. But also not terribly different than that. But I think that's the kind of area where we should be researching, we should be investigating, we should be finding out what's going on. Instead of suppressing the fact that the human body always has had an endocannabinoid system, and that cannabinoid refers to cannabis, or rather a lot of its inherent molecular qualities, we should be investigating that openly and deeply, and to let the science lead us to the best possible conclusions about how we can be maximizing, or at least utilizing, the healing powers of this plant to the best and fullest potential, and to the best for all of humanity. We shouldn't let it become yet another thing that gets profiteered on, and at the cost of the detriment of the thing itself. Food, all food. Let's step back. It's not that crazy to think of a plant as a divine gift from life itself, right? All food is alive. Let's set aside our postmodern sort of, post-GMO, post-terrible food industry ideas of food, and let's not get caught up in that argument. Let's set that aside and know that it is evil and wrong and a bastardization of what food is. I'm not naive on that. But let's look at food in its purest sense, in its organic sense, in its most healthy and real sense. Real food. Where does it come from? Nature. What is nature? All the manifestation of the divine. So all food is a gift from the divine, because it sustains us, it heals us. All food, there's ancient mystic wisdom that resides in almost all continents or cultures around the world, and that's the best medicine. The best medicine is healthy food. Obviously, there might be some pharmaceutical products nowadays that do very specific things much better than just eating a good diet does. But that doesn't mean we should throw the baby out with the bathwater. We should be, instead of arguing about whether or not we subscribe to the ism of vegetarianism or the ism of veganism, and instead of worrying about whether or not we're going to fight each other over which diet is the healthier diet, we should be holding those industries that render that which we feed on, and we should be holding that entire spectrum of industries, the people who grow the food, the people who produce the food, the people who cook and render new food products, the people who package the food, the people who ship the food, store the food. That entire spectrum of industries should be looked at and completely, radically re-engineered from the ground up. Because as it stands today, it's healthy on an infinite level. One of the great things about that... Excuse me. Despite the cold I've been fighting, I had to, log my hours today for this podcast. So forgive me for being on the air with a mild cough. But one of the most interesting and fascinating things that Paul Hawken revealed in his video about the book that he and his team put together, because he didn't really write the book, he edited it, and he's very self-transparent about that. But this book, Drawdown, was that they crunched the numbers. A really large and very impressive team of scientists and researchers and people with a commitment to the truth and not marketing and not upspin, for a particular brand or another. People who wanted to do real, genuine, investigative science. And one of the surprising kind of overlooked things that they discovered was that one of the most toxic things about our society that if we addressed it, would be the easiest and most impactful fix about that would address all the complex of issues around our climate and the pollution that is affecting our health. Because again, I'm not trying to hang this on the nail of climate change, but our environment, that which we breathe, it's all connected. And what we put into it, what we dump into it, is important. And so the surprising thing that they discovered that one of the most, at the top of the list of most toxic industries and most easily fixed things, refrigeration. We don't think about that. No one thinks about that. When we think about toxic waste, we think about nuclear power plants, we think about coal mines and coal burning, as opposed to, and we think about the best solutions are solar and wind. And he kept saying that, solar and wind are not the top solution. They're not the singular solutions. And that the whole network of things needs to be addressed. Another interesting, surprising one was that educating and empowering women is in the top 5, I think, or something like that, in the top 10 of most effective solutions to our current state of self-destructive, toxic world, society. The way we live is unhealthy. And never mind forget about whether or not the climate is changing. It's toxic. We are increasingly making our atmosphere, our water and our air, and the ground that we grow our food in, we're making it toxic, like disgustingly so. So stop our fighting over whether or not climate change is real, and start realizing that toxic waste is toxic waste. Whether it comes out of your refrigerator, or it comes out of the tailpipe of your car, or it comes out of the smokestacks of that processing plant. Toxic waste is toxic waste. And just because it seems to dissipate doesn't mean that it's magically gone. This place that we live in is an enclosed, finite system. It's part of an infinite unfolding fractal, yes, but the earth itself, this womb that gives birth to us and sustains us with itself, because life consumes life to be alive, and that, we are pumping out so much toxic waste that we can't continue to be healthy and to live in this one place that we, that's the urgent thing. And that can be easily remedied. All we have to do is change how we do things, folks. And the only people truly resisting and spreading the dogma of resistance to change about how we do things are those who profiteer on the way we do things now. And one of the simplest ways to disengage from that is to go, for sure, some things seem overwhelmingly impossible to do, but the more you can disengage from a particular subsystem of the whole giant meta system of abuse and self-destruction, and the more progress we're going to make. And the more you can invest in the alternative system, which is the green, healthy, both at the large scale, with such things as renewable energy, solar, wind, those are great things, but those by themselves, if all we do is rally to vote one great solar panel measure in that gives everyone solar power, and then we stop, then we haven't solved the problem. You know what I mean? We have to change. We have to empower and educate women so that they are equal to men, and we have to educate. And here's something that I thought was curious that is missing, but might be in their coming attractions feature, which is something that the Paul Hawken, yeah, Paul Hawk and his Drawdown team talking about is the next 2 books that they're going to release are about other theories that are scientifically sound, but just don't have enough, capital investment in them yet to make real practical tests on yet. But we need to educate and empower boys too, to liberate. And let's you add a different set of language. We need to liberate our young people and each other and everyone of every generation, really, from their minds. We need to liberate ourselves from our minds and from our ego minds of addiction to more speed, more glory, more greed, more, get what I'm saying. And cannabis and hemp can be one of the central tools, a pair of the central tools. Why? Let's start with hemp, because hemp is easier and more explicit, and there's a great business argument for it. Hemp is cheaper than most of the non-renewable resources that we currently profiteer on heavily and rely on for the production of energy and commodities. And hemp, while being cheaper and way more renewable and sustainable than most of those various commodities that are being ripped out of the earth and whose processes are toxic to do so. Hemp is itself great at detoxifying air and ground, and it's highly sustainable. It's beyond renewable. And it renders things that it renders products. You can create products from it that will outperform every one of those other toxic waste products that we're currently addicted to. You can make plastic out of hemp that'll outperform most oil-based plastics. You can make, mercantile fabrics out of it that'll outperform most of the other much less green, much less sustainable materials out there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know it for a fact yet, but I feel fairly confident that it's true that cannabis has a multitude of applications like that, ranging from nutrition to healing, and including one of the ones that is where the sort of the avant-garde of research is happening, healing of addiction, as well as the healing of medical conditions, including seizures, etc. The stuff that help tip the scale on medical cannabis and its acceptance legally, state by state. That clearly can't be where it all stops. There must be more to it than just that. And therefore, we really should be investing the time and energy and the science in figuring out that which will be a breakthrough in the next breakthrough. We need to get to those next breakthroughs. We need to find out what those next breakthroughs are and start using them. And also at the personal level, as a medicine and I don't like the term recreational use. I think it should be decriminalized completely, and that people should be allowed to grow it the way you're allowed to grow tomatoes at home. I don't think it should just be decriminalized. It's a fruit that can be eaten, or I guess it's more of a vegetable that can be eaten, and it's also a fruit, right? Like the leaves and the fruit are two different things. For those who don't know, everyone's familiar. Like the image on the cover of this talk show, everyone's familiar with the solar panel leaf that looks a bit like a palm frond or something, and that's beautiful and fractal and all kinds of gorgeous and one of the most vibrant greens you ever see in nature, and that's what I've considered like the green vegetable that can be eaten, highly nutritious from what I understand. Certainly, I always feel good when I eat it, and I don't mean I feel good like I'm high. Because when eaten cold, there's no chemical effect on the brain. It's just feeling good because you've had some nutrition. You know, like when you eat some really great food, you just feel good. It's endorphins and stuff from eating something that is nutritiously yummy, and good for us. And the fruit, of course, is the nuggets, as they're commonly called, that radically, interestingly different without feeling like fruit, right? It's like it clearly meant to be smoked. It just lends itself to it, as it grows. And that here's where I think it can heal, where I do think there can be some healing of the species one bowl at a time. Anyone who's smoked cannabis more than a dozen times knows that it liberates the mind from its own blockages and elevates the mind to new heights of curiosity and of imagination and of imaginative exploration. That's why I think it's an amazing thing to couple with meditation. I think simultaneously one should also meditate apart from cannabis, that the two are really important. You got to spend some time with the cannabis and some time without the cannabis. I totally missed the 4-minute and 20 mark. We got 3 minutes left, folks. Thanks for tuning in. As always, I don't want any of my statements to be misconstrued. I am very much a proponent of safety, of thoughtful, and I know that's crazy because I sound like an anarchist, but of thoughtful regulation. I always remind people that no matter what happens to our current corrupt system, whatever form of change occurs, we're still going to have to organize, right? We're still going to have to remind ourselves and future people who may not know that which we know now, that we have to remind them that, this is dangerous, this is not dangerous, this stuff you should handle gently, this you can smack around. That's what regulation is supposed to be about, in the purest sense of, the most well-intended sense of the term. But okay, I digress. Thanks for tuning in. Don't ever think that I'm radically espousing just overindulgence, and that's what I'm saying. We have to be careful how we present ourselves. The problem with alcohol culture was that it didn't, in any way, shape, or form, present itself in a way that it prevented addiction, and alcohol is highly addictive. Conversely, thank God, I think there's plenty of evidence that cannabis is not addictive, and we can talk about that in greater depth at a future episode of Cannabis Talk when I explicitly am on vacation and I'm not smoking cannabis. But here we go. Time to say goodbye and play the outro music. If you like what you've heard, please share. As always, folks, may peace, love, and grooviness be with you. Be good humans. Smoke cannabis with moderation, friends. Don't overdo it. Send me your questions to my email or my other social media platforms. Peace out.